Hello, and welcome to this episode of Storytime. Today's excerpt comes from my short story called Remember Mama, and it can be found in Peripheral Visions and Other Stories. It's a tender story, probably a little sad story, but one I'm sure that you can relate to. I know many other people have. Remember Mama. Maggie, where's my tea? Maggie set down the dishcloth and moved to answer her mother's call. The rest of the china, like so many other tasks half completed, would have to wait. You had your tea already, Mama. Remember? I brought you a cup of tea, and you finished it, and said you didn't want any more. But the old woman shook her head obstinately. No, you didn't. You never brought it. I've been waiting for hours, the now familiar note of self-pity creeping into her voice. And you never brought it to me. Maggie smothered a sigh. There was no point in arguing with her mother. She could show her the cup she drank from, and her mother still wouldn't remember. Couldn't, Maggie corrected herself. Her mother couldn't remember. She had to keep reminding herself of that fact, or the frustration would soon grow too hard to handle. Where is? Her mother struggled for a name and then gave up. Where did he go? Paul, the name emphasized just a bit, had to go away on a business trip to California. I told you all about it, Mama, remember? Paul, who had shown such infinite patience and tenderness with his mother-in-law. He pretended everything was normal and persisted in carrying on one-sided conversations with her about the weather, current events, upcoming plans for the weekend. But lately her mother couldn't even recall his name. Oh yes, now I remember. But her mother's voice held no conviction. It just slipped my mind for a minute. She looked at her daughter, obviously hoping that the excuse would be accepted. Maggie nodded her head, joining her mother in the delusion. Mama's poor memory. How often she and her father had teased her mother about her inability to recall names, dates, places. It had been humorous once, but no longer. Now it was a tragic reality. After Maggie's father had died, her mother had become distracted and forgetful, and initially Maggie put much of the blame on grief. But even sorrow, she was finally forced to admit, couldn't wreak such havoc on a person's mental abilities. Even grief couldn't keep you from recalling where you lived, where you were going, whether or not you'd eaten, or slept, or changed your clothes. Only sickness could do that. Remembering this, Maggie asked with more patience, "Do you want another cup of tea now, Mama?" as she straightened the soft throw across her mother's narrow, blue-veined feet. Maggie recalled watching her mother knit the soft mix of blue and cream and orchid yarns during the long nights in the hospital, the clicking sound of the needles, a counterpoint to the noise of the respirator that filled her father's lungs with air. Someday, she thought, I would have to ask her how to knit like that. But there was never a free moment to learn. And now her mother couldn't even tie her own shoes. No, I'm not thirsty anymore, but I am hungry, Maggie. How soon is dinner? Not for a long time, Mama. We just had lunch. Her mother frowned, and Maggie knew she didn't recall the omelet filled with cheese and herbs that her daughter had carefully prepared just a half hour ago. She went on quickly. I thought I'd make a roast for dinner with new potatoes and green beans with dill. Would you like that for dinner, Mama? Knowing the question was pointless even as it was asked. No matter what her mother's initial response was, she was certain to change her mind by the time the food was ready. But Maggie had to keep the fiction alive that her mother's opinions and desires counted for something, as inconsistent as they were. Her mother was silent for a moment, considering, and then shook her head. I don't like beans. They've got strings. Why can't we have carrots instead? Maggie smiled. Okay, Mama, I'll make carrots. Carrots and honey sauce like you used to do. Why don't you take a little rest now while I finish washing the dishes? And she stroked her mother's hair as the old woman obediently closed her eyes. Okay, that's just a little taste of Remember Mama. Um, I'm sure you've known people, or maybe in your own family, you've had a parent or a loved one who has suffered from some form of dementia or Alzheimer's. It's very sad. It's sad to watch. It's sad to watch them lose their memories, and it's sad to be the one knowing that the memories that they have that were part of you are now lost forever. And, I was fortunate in that both my parents did not suffer from any form of Alzheimer's or dementia, but I knew a lot of people who did. And I thought that must be one of the hardest things in the world, is to watch someone slowly slip away mentally, someone slowly drift away, and there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do, there's nothing you can say, there's nothing you can try. All you can do is be patient and be loving. So that is where Remember Mama comes from. And it's the kind of story that has touched, as I said, has touched a lot of people and makes those of us who are not going through it appreciate the fact that we can converse with our older relatives and hopefully give some comfort to those who are experiencing it. Thanks for listening. If you want to read the story in full, you can find it in Peripheral Visions and Other Stories. Thanks so much, and I'll see you again back for another story time.